All right, so we're diving into A Tale of Two Cities, Dickens' classic.
Yeah, revolutionary France and England, late 1700s.
Tumultuous times,
Ah.
a really good backdrop for a story. And this one's got it all: history, romance, mystery.
And you can't forget the knitting.
Oh, the knitting. Seriously, a woman knitting with a purpose, that's just chilling. It hooks you right in, doesn't it?
What's so amazing about Dickens is he can capture a whole era. You don't just read it, you feel like you're there.
Right from that first line, the best of times, worst of times, two countries, totally different, but both about to change forever.
The contrast is so important, France especially. Dickens shows you this powder keg ready to explode.
The monarchy spending like crazy while everyone else is struggling. Yeah.
Exactly, and punishments were brutal. It's no wonder things were about to boil over.
Like Dickens is hinting at the violence to come right from the start. And then you meet the characters caught in the middle of it all. Dr. Manette, imprisoned for 18 years.
And his daughter Lucy, she doesn't even know he exists.
That's tragic.
Yeah.
To be separated for so long, it makes you think about the human cost of all this upheaval.
Their reunion, it's both heartwarming, but you can feel the trauma Dr. Manette carries. Dickens was great at creating characters that are relatable, even when they're going through extraordinary things.
And then there's Charles Darnay, a French aristocrat trying to escape his past, build a new life in England.
Falls in love with Lucy, of course. It wouldn't be a Dickens novel without a little romance.
True. But it gets complicated. Enter Sidney Carton, our cynical lawyer.
Who also happens to be in love with Lucy. Now we've got a love triangle. Classic Dickens.
But it's more than that. It's like each character represents something about that time. Darnay has this hope for change. Carton is more disillusioned.
Like two sides of the same coin, drawn to Lucy's goodness.
Speaking of light and dark, let's talk about the French Revolution itself. Dickens really brings the energy of Paris to life.
The storming of the Bastille, it's a pivotal moment, all that fury and passion. You understand why it became such a symbol.
Yeah, and then that image of Foulon being executed. Brutal stuff. It shows how quickly things can descend into mob mentality.
But Dickens doesn't just show one side. Yes, there's violence, but he also shows why the people were so angry. Like at the Defarge's wine shop. It's a meeting place for revolutionaries.
But it's also a place where they can share their struggles, find strength in numbers.
It represents both the hope and the danger of the revolution, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. It's like this simmering rage ready to explode. And then there's Madame Defarge, always knitting. She embodies that, doesn't she?
Oh, Madame Defarge. She's such a fascinating character. Her knitting isn't just a hobby, it's symbolic.
Yeah, like she's weaving a tapestry of fate, and every stitch is another life caught up in the revolution.
And that register she keeps, with the names of those doomed by the revolution. Chilling.
It's terrifying. You feel like no one is safe from her judgment.
Dickens was so good at building suspense. We know things are going to get worse, but we're on the edge of our seats wondering who will survive.
And the courtroom scenes. When Charles Darnay is on trial, so much tension.
It really shows you how unpredictable things were, especially the justice system. And Dickens uses foreshadowing to hint at the danger lurking beneath the surface. It's masterful.
Yeah, nobody feels truly safe. You can just sense that this revolution will have consequences that reach far beyond those directly involved.
Absolutely. And that's what makes A Tale of Two Cities so much more than just a historical novel. It's about love, loss, the fight for justice. It's about the choices we make in impossible situations.
It really gets you thinking, what would you do if you were thrown into that kind of chaos?
Right. Would you be swept up in it all or try to hold on to some sense of normalcy? It's a question that's still relevant today.
And that's why these classic stories endure, don't they? They make us look at ourselves, at our own values.
Absolutely. They challenge us to think about how we would act in those situations.
It's fascinating stuff. And with that, let's dive even deeper into A Tale of Two Cities after a short break. We'll be right back to unravel more of its unforgettable characters and the profound themes that still resonate with readers centuries later.
Back to A Tale of Two Cities. Last we left off, Charles Darnay's fate was looking pretty grim. Condemned by the revolutionaries.
Yeah, but Dickens always has a few surprises up his sleeve, right? It's what keeps you hooked. So how does Darnay get out of this mess?
Well, it's pretty dramatic. Remember how Dr. Manette spent years helping people in Paris? He earned a lot of respect.
Right.
So he uses that to plead for Darnay's release, and it actually works. It's a reminder that even in the middle of all this chaos, good deeds can have power.
It's heartwarming, for sure. But knowing Dickens, it can't be smooth sailing from here on out.
Sadly, no. The revolution has a way of catching up with everyone, even those trying to escape it. Darnay can't outrun his past. His family, the Evermonds, they were deeply tied to the aristocracy.
It's like trying to escape your family's legacy. But what happens? What brings him back into danger?
It's a letter. From Gabelle, a former servant of the Evermonds who's been imprisoned. He begs Darnay to help, to vouch for him.
Wow.
And Darnay feels like he has to go back to Paris, even though it's incredibly dangerous.
Knowing what's happening there, that's a huge risk. What makes him do it?
It shows Darnay's sense of justice, his loyalty. He could have stayed safe in England with Lucy and their daughter, but he couldn't just ignore Gabelle's plea.
It's a stark contrast to his uncle, the Marquis. He represented the worst of the aristocracy.
Oh, absolutely. Dick doesn't hold back in describing the Marquis's cruelty and indifference. Remember that scene where he runs over a child with his carriage?
And then just throws a coin at the father like it's nothing.
Exactly. It shows the huge gap between the rich and the poor, a gap that couldn't be ignored any longer.
It's a haunting image, that coin covered in blood. A symbol of the carelessness that led to the revolution. Speaking of haunting, what about the Defarges? Their wine shop is like the revolution's headquarters.
It's where the whispers turn into action. Madame Defarge with her knitting needles.
It's like a countdown to the bloodshed.
She's such a compelling character, but terrifying at the same time. She's so driven by revenge. It makes you wonder, can you ever have justice without violence?
And her register, the list of people she's marked for death, it's just chilling.
Yeah. She reminds us that even people fighting for a good cause can get lost in hatred. It makes you think, what would happen to someone like her if the revolution succeeded? Would she ever be able to stop?
It's a question Dickens leaves open. I guess revolutions are never simple.
Exactly. They're messy, unpredictable, and the line between righteous anger and just plain rage can be so thin.
Like, even with the best intentions, things can get out of control.
Which brings us to another big theme, love and sacrifice. Even with all the darkness, characters like Darnay, Dr. Manette, even Carton, they show incredible compassion.
And those acts, they might seem small, but they have a big impact. It's like Dickens is saying that even in the darkest times, individual choices matter. But I have to admit, when I first read this, I wasn't sure about Sidney Carton. He's so cynical at first. What did you think of him?
He's definitely a character who starts off shrouded in gloom. Drinking too much, complaining about his life. He says he doesn't care about anything. But there's more to him than that.
You can tell there's a hidden depth there.
It's Dickens' skill as a writer. He slowly reveals Carton's softer side, especially around Lucy. His love for her, even though he never says it out loud, it becomes his driving force.
His redemption.
Yes.
And his transformation in the end is incredible. It's like he becomes a completely different person.
Mm-hmm.
How does Dickens make such an unlikable character so compelling?
It's how he develops Carton's character. He peels back the layers, shows us glimpses of tenderness. His love for Lucy becomes this powerful force. It's not just romantic love.
No, it's something more.
It pushes him to make the ultimate sacrifice. He gives his life for Lucy's happiness and for the man she loves, a man who represents everything Carton feels he could never be.
It's so powerful. It is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done. It is a far, far better rest that I go to than I have ever known. Gives me chills every time.
It's a moment that turns Carton from a minor character into a true hero. And it speaks to the themes of the book. Redemption, second chances, finding meaning even in death. But the story doesn't end there, does it?
Not at all. We've still got the escape from Paris, the final showdown with Madame Defarge. And that question, can true justice ever exist in a world so divided? Should we keep going?
Let's. But first, let's give our listeners a moment to catch their breath. When we come back, we'll explore the last part of this amazing story and see what fate has in store for our characters.
We're back, and man, that ending of A Tale of Two Cities, it's a lot to process.
Even after Carton's sacrifice, the pension's still there, Darnay might be free, but getting out of Paris with the revolutionaries on his tail?
No easy feat.
Not at all. It's a race against time, danger everywhere. And then you've got Madame Defarge, still after the Evermond.
Relentless.
Yeah.
It's like she embodies the revolution's thirst for revenge.
But Dickens gives us a glimpse into what's driving her rage. It's not just abstract ideas.
Right.
We find out about the terrible things that happened to her family because of Darnay's father and uncle.
It's like her vendetta becomes personal.
Exactly. Suddenly, she's not just this symbol of the revolution. She's a woman deeply hurt.
You understand her anger more, even though her actions are still, well, extreme?
It definitely complicates the idea of justice. Can you really have true justice when it's so tied up with personal revenge and past wrongs? Dickens makes you think about these tough questions.
And then there's Miss Pross, Lucy's companion. She's usually seen as kind of comic relief. But in the end, she's incredible.
That scene where she confronts Madame Defarge, it's so unexpected.
Totally.
Miss Pross becomes this symbol of courage. She's willing to do anything to protect Lucy.
You see that heroes come from anywhere. And the fact that she loses her hearing in the struggle, it shows the real cost of all this.
It's another sacrifice, and it highlights how even ordinary people can be incredibly brave. In the end, it's Miss Pross who makes sure the Mannettes can escape.
You feel such relief when they finally get away. But there's also sadness. Paris is still in chaos.
It's a bittersweet ending. Love and loyalty win out, but there's a lot of loss too. Dickens reminds us that good doesn't always triumph easily.
But there's still hope, right?
Yeah.
Carton's sacrifice, giving his life so others can have a better future.
It's such a powerful message. A Tale of Two Cities shows that even small acts of kindness and sacrifice can change things. It can inspire people to make the world better.
It's a story that sticks with you, makes you think about your own choices, the kind of world you want to live in. That's what makes a classic, I guess.
Absolutely. A Tale of Two Cities will always be relevant. It's a story about love, loss, resilience. It shows how strong the human spirit can be, even in the face of enormous challenges. It's a story that will keep inspiring readers for years to come.
Well said. I think that's a perfect way to wrap up our deep dive into A Tale of Two Cities. It's been a pleasure discussing this incredible book with you.
The pleasure was all mine.
And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on the deep dive. Keep exploring, keep asking those tough questions, and we'll see you next time for another fascinating adventure into the world of stories and ideas.